Before you call me cruel, answer one question. If you knew that a beautiful child would move through life with doors already open, would it be wrong to want that advantage for your own son? I never tried to take a father away from him. I gave him the most patient father I knew. At his 5th birthday, I only thanked the man whose face I believed our son had inherited. Warren put both palms flat on the cake table and watched me finish, as quiet as he became whenever courage failed him. I was certain the 40 people around us could see that I had only said aloud what genetics had made obvious. My name is Sloane Mercer. At 35, I photographed families for a living. Hard light could change a chin. I knew which child should stand closest to the lens and how far a father could turn before a heavy jaw looked strong instead of soft. Clients called that talent. I called it seeing what was there. Warren and I had been together for 10 years and married for 7. He was a civil engineer for the county, the kind of man who checked a bridge calculation twice, even when the software had already approved it. He was not handsome in the easy way. His nose had been broken during school basketball and never set straight. His ears stood out. In photographs, his smile often arrived a second after everyone else's. None of that had mattered when I married him. Warren was the man who brought a folding stool to my outdoor shoots because he knew my lower back hurt after 4 hours. He learned how to hold a reflector without throwing light into a child's eyes. On the first Sunday of every month, before either of us opened a laptop, we walked through the botanical garden with coffee and chose one place where we would take a picture together. No tripod, no retakes. A stranger pressed the button, and we accepted whatever face we made. I kept those pictures in a green album. Warren always wrote the date on the back. His handwriting was narrow and exact. That part of our marriage was real. So was the part that made me lonely. When Warren loved someone, he solved things for them. If I said work had exhausted me, he filled the car and made dinner. If I said I felt unattractive, he cleaned my camera lenses and told me not to listen to difficult clients. He heard the practical problem inside every sentence and missed the person who had said it. I once asked whether he still thought I was beautiful. He said I looked like myself. Of course, he meant that as comfort. Warren believed familiar was the highest compliment a person could give. I grew up beside a sister who never had to ask that question. Eva was 2 years older and looked ready for a photograph even while chewing breakfast. When we were children, my mother did not insult me. She only fixed me. She pressed down my hair before school pictures. She reminded me to close my lips over my braces. At family weddings, she placed Eva beside the bride and gave me someone's handbag to hold. People like to say children do not understand beauty. They understand where adults place them. By 15, I could improve a picture before I knew how to drive. I learned angles because angles were fair. A camera did not pretend every face received the same welcome. It showed the difference, and then it gave me tools to manage it. Callum Reid required no management. He had been Warren's best friend since they were 19. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, and careless with attention because he had never lacked it. Women remembered him after one introduction. Children climbed onto him at barbecues. Even older men forgave him for interrupting. The 3 of us had history. Callum helped Warren carry my studio lights up 4 flights of stairs when I rented my first space. He gave a speech at our wedding. He knew which beer Warren ordered and which subjects could make him talk for an hour. Astronomy, road design, why people ruined good coffee with flavoured syrup. I used to tell Eva that Warren was the man women married and Callum was the man they looked at twice. She told me that was not a harmless distinction. I said she only disliked hearing a married woman admit that eyes continued working after a wedding. Then Warren and I began trying for a child. He approached it with the same steady care he brought to everything else. He made a budget for parental leave. He compared health plans. He measured the small room beside ours and drew 2 nursery layouts before I was even pregnant. I opened the green album instead. There were 7 years of Warren's face in it, followed by 3 childhood photographs his mother had given me. I studied the boy he had been. The same ears, a narrow chest, pale hair that made his forehead look larger. In one school picture, His lips were pressed together as if smiling required permission. I kept looking at that picture after Warren went to bed. The fear did not arrive as disgust. It arrived as responsibility. Attractive children were included faster. Teachers assumed confidence when a child looked confident. Other children could be vicious before they understood the word vicious. I had spent 20 years watching faces change the way people were treated. Why was I supposed to forget all of that because it sounded shallow? Warren found me with the photographs one night. He placed both palms on the desk and asked why I had arranged them by age. I said I was curious what our child might look like. He studied the rows, then told me his hair had darkened by 10 and that the Mercer smile appeared late in every child. I looked at the stiff little boy in the center and decided Warren was defending him because no one else would. That was how I counted it then. Warren could give a child patience, safety, and a home where promises meant something. Callum could give a child a face the world welcomed. I did not need to replace one man with the other. I only needed one part from each. The first time I crossed the line with Callum was not after a wild night. There was no accident to blame. I checked my cycle that morning. Callum came to my studio to help move a painted backdrop. Warren was working late on a drainage review. I had worn a blouse Callum once said made my eyes look darker. After we moved the backdrop, I opened wine. I asked whether he ever wondered what would have happened if we had met before I met Warren. He answered the question I had offered, not the one I was hiding. Callum thought I wanted him. That was true enough to keep him from asking for a better reason. We crossed the boundary without saying what it would mean the next morning. 2 days later, I tried to conceive with Warren. 4 days after that, Callum came back. I made the dates overlap on purpose. If the child was Warren's, I told myself nothing had been taken from him. If the child was Callum's, Warren would still receive what he wanted most. A son or daughter to love. A family to protect. Callum would owe nothing because he would never need to know. I called that controlled. When the test turned positive, Warren sat on the closed toilet lid and cried into both hands. Then he laughed at himself, stood up, and placed his palms on the sink as if he needed to steady the whole room. I watched him in the mirror and thought only about whether my plan had worked. He painted the nursery pale green, rebuilt the crib when one rail squeaked, and marked pregnancy books with yellow tabs. I accepted his care as the stable half of my plan. Theo arrived 8 days early with dark hair and a serious little face. Warren held him against his chest and kept whispering that he was here. I searched Theo's face. His eyes were grey at first. His nose was small. His ears lay flat against his head. Newborns barely look like people, but I saw evidence because I needed evidence. When Callum visited the hospital and leaned over the clear crib, Theo opened his eyes. Callum looked at me for half a second too long. Neither of us said anything. Warren's mother, Rebecca, brought one of his baby photographs 2 weeks later. She placed it beside Theo and said the mouth was the same. I told her all babies made that expression when they were hungry. She laughed and left the picture on our mantel. I moved it into a drawer before dinner. Warren never asked where it went. That was one of his failures. He saw changes and waited for explanations instead of asking for them. When I was tired, he carried more. When I was distant, he gave me room. His love could feel like a house with every repair completed and no one speaking inside it. As a father, though, he was better than any plan I could have made. He took the 2 o'clock feedings after I stopped nursing. He learned which songs settled Theo in the car and which stuffed rabbit had to sit beside the bath. When Theo developed a fever at 11 months, Warren slept on the nursery floor with one hand through the crib bars. I woke at dawn and found Theo's fingers wrapped around his. At 2, Theo ran into the street after a red ball. Warren caught him by the back of his coat and then sat on the curb because his knees would not hold. He placed both palms on the pavement and waited until he could speak without frightening the child. I saw that posture as softness. Warren always needed time before strong feelings became useful. Theo grew into a beautiful boy. That was not only a mother's opinion. Strangers said it in grocery lines. Clients who saw his picture on my studio desk asked whether I used him for catalogue work. He had thick brown hair, wide hazel eyes, and a smile that changed his whole face. Each compliment strengthened my private answer. The eyes came from Callum. The shoulders would come later. The smile had the same careless brightness. When Warren said Theo had my eyes, I thought at least they were not his. I never said that part aloud. I still understood there were limits. Callum became Uncle Callum because he was already inside our life. He brought Theo a wooden balance bike for his 3rd birthday and spent an hour teaching him to coast down our driveway. Warren ran beside them with one hand near the handlebars. I stood at the bottom taking pictures. In every frame, Callum looked like the man people would assume was the father. Warren looked like the careful uncle making sure no one fell. That difference pleased me. I called it evidence. For almost 5 years, Callum and I did not cross the physical line again. At family dinners, he sometimes caught Theo's expression and looked toward me. I smiled back while Warren found a missing cup. Only I knew which 2 men had built the life in front of us. I called it the best of both. Theo had Callum's looks and Warren's devotion. Warren had the child he had always wanted. Callum had freedom. I had made one ugly choice and produced an arrangement that kept 3 people happy. 4, once I counted Theo. The affair started again 6 weeks before his 5th birthday. Newly single, Callum came to my studio for business portraits after joining a private fitness club. He asked whether I could make him look trustworthy without making him look dull. I told him Warren had already cornered that market. Callum laughed, and I kept going. During the shoot, I showed him a portrait of Theo on my monitor. Theo was leaning against a white fence, one foot crossed over the other, his smile loose and bright. Callum stopped adjusting his cuff. He asked whether I had ever checked. I told him I did not need to. I enlarged Theo's eyes, then opened one of Callum's portraits beside it. The colour was not exact, but the shape looked close enough. When you work with images, you learn how much certainty can be created by choosing the right pair. Callum asked whether Warren had ever wondered. I said Warren believed what he was given because trust was the easiest setting for him. Of course, I made that sound like a flaw in Warren instead of an advantage I had used. Callum placed his fingertips against the desk. He looked pleased first, then cautious. He said Theo had Warren's last name and Warren's life. I answered that names belonged to paperwork. Faces were harder to fake. We met again 3 days later in a hotel bar near the airport. Then in Callum's apartment the following week. I told Warren I was editing a large school order. He brought dinner to the studio and left it in the refrigerator because I said I would be late. The next morning, the family tablet lit up while Warren was packing Theo's lunch. My message account had stayed connected after I used the tablet to send a client gallery. I saw the notification from the hallway and reached it before he did. Warren asked why Callum was messaging me before 7. I said he needed another portrait file. Warren placed both palms on the counter. He asked why a portrait file required Callum to say he could still smell my perfume. I gave him the part I thought I could defend. I said Callum flirted with everyone and that Warren knew his personality. Then I accused him of reading a message that was not meant for him. He said the screen had been facing the room. I told him that did not make the conversation his. Warren looked at me for several seconds. He asked whether I wanted to change my answer. I said there was nothing to change. He nodded and finished packing Theo's lunch. Cheese sandwich, apple slices. The blue cup because Theo refused the green one that month. I watched him close the small bag and decided I had contained the problem. After that, Warren became quieter but not careless. He still took Theo to school. He still sent me the schedule for the birthday pavilion and confirmed the cake order. He asked Callum whether he could arrive early to help with tables. Callum showed me the message and said Warren sounded normal. I said normal was where Warren hid when he could not compete. My friend Mara encouraged that version. She did makeup for half my family sessions and treated male attention like proof of good health. Years earlier, she had been the first person to laugh when I said Warren was husband material and Callum was genetic material. She called it dark humour then. When I told her Callum and I were talking again, she asked whether Theo made the answer obvious. I sent her the side-by-side portraits. She replied that some faces confessed for people. That sentence stayed with me. The birthday party was my largest plan for Theo yet. I rented the glass pavilion at the Botanical Garden, the same place where Warren and I had taken our second Sunday photograph. 40 guests accepted. Family, neighbours, parents from Theo's school, and several of Warren's oldest friends. Warren handled the practical work. He confirmed chairs. He collected the cake. He made small paper labels for children with food allergies. I built the visual part. Green balloons, cream tablecloths, and a wall of photographs showing one picture from every month of Theo's life. The centre print was the fence portrait. Callum arrived in a fitted blue shirt and lifted Theo over his head before his coat was off. Theo laughed and kicked his shoes in the air. 3 people reached for their phones. Warren carried a tray of juice behind them. I watched the contrast and felt the old satisfaction. One man made the picture. The other made sure no one spilled anything. Near the photograph wall, Callum murmured that Theo made any test unnecessary. I answered that some results were visible without a laboratory. Daniel came up behind us, carrying a bag of ice, and stopped long enough to hear. I forgot him because he was Warren's quietest friend, and quiet men rarely held my attention. Before lunch, I asked Warren to take a photograph of Callum, Theo, and me. He had been moving through the pavilion with my backup camera, collecting candid pictures because I wanted one birthday where I was not trapped behind the lens. I placed Theo between Callum and me. Callum bent toward him. I rested one hand on Theo's shoulder and the other on Callum's arm. Warren lowered the camera slightly. He asked whether I wanted him in the picture. I said I wanted one of the 3 of us first. His palms settled against the camera body, flat and still. Then he raised it and took the photograph. When he showed me the screen, I said the 3 of us looked like a real little family. Callum laughed because he still believed every cruel sentence could be protected by tone. Mara laughed too, but only after checking Warren's face. Rebecca heard me. She had been arranging candles near the cake. She put the box down and asked what kind of family I thought Warren belonged to. I told her not to turn a photograph into a problem. Warren said nothing. He removed the memory card, placed it in its plastic case, and inserted a clean one. I assumed he did not want to keep looking at the image. For the rest of lunch, people were careful around us. Warren's college friend Daniel stopped Callum near the drinks table and spoke to him in a low voice. Mara stayed beside me but checked her phone often. Rebecca took Theo to the butterfly room for 20 minutes and returned holding his hand. I saw the discomfort and blamed Warren. His silence had a way of making other people work around it. If he had laughed, the sentence would have remained a joke. That was my one correct complaint about him. Warren let silence do jobs that belonged to words. He could make a room, punish me without asking it to. He had done smaller versions of that throughout our marriage, withdrawing behind chores until I became the loudest person and therefore the easiest one to blame. I planned to take control back during the toast. The cake came out at 4. Theo blew out 5 candles while Warren held the plate steady. After the children took their slices, Rebecca led them toward a scavenger hunt in the garden. Theo ran after his cousins with green icing on his cheek. The adults remained near the tables. Daniel set his phone against a vase because Warren had asked him to record the cake and speeches. The late sun turned the glass walls gold, and my photographs of Theo covered the wall behind me. I lifted my glass. At first, I thanked everyone for coming. I said Theo had been the easiest child to photograph because he had never met a camera he disliked. People smiled. Warren stood beside the cake with a small plate in one hand, waiting for Theo to come back. I thanked Warren for arranging the day. I said he was reliable, patient, and the kind of father who remembered every detail. His face softened. For 1 second, the speech could still have belonged to our family. Then I looked at Callum. I said a separate thank you for Theo's appearance probably belonged to him. The first laugh came from Mara. 2 others followed because people obey the first sound in an uncertain room. Callum looked down and smiled into his glass. I pointed toward Warren and said I loved my husband, but life would have been harder on Theo if he had received Warren's complete genetic set. No one laughed that time. Warren put the plate down. Both palms rested on the cake table. Flat. Patient. I knew the posture. He used it when he needed other people to finish being emotional before he returned to facts. Daniel asked what I meant. I told him not to make a medical claim out of a compliment. Then I looked at Theo's fence portrait and at Callum standing below it. I said people could compare the eyes and smile for themselves. Some things did not require a DNA test. The room went quiet in sections. A chair scraped near the glass wall. Someone set down a fork. Mara no longer looked at me. Callum's smile disappeared. He glanced at the garden doors, then at Warren. Warren asked whether I was finished. I heard defeat. I told him I was finished if everyone had finally learned to accept an honest joke. He picked up the plate and carried it toward the children's table. Daniel moved aside for him. Rebecca came through the doors with Theo and stopped when she saw Warren's face. Warren crouched, wiped the icing from Theo's cheek, and handed him the cake. His voice stayed even. Theo leaned against his shoulder while he ate. To me, the scene confirmed the arrangement I had built. Callum supplied the face. Warren supplied everything a face could not. Guests began leaving early. They blamed bedtime, traffic, and the long drive home. The pavilion looked larger each time another family left. Mara hugged me quickly and said she would call the next morning. Daniel took Warren aside near the coat rack. Rebecca packed Theo's gifts without asking me where anything belonged. Callum left before the candles had burned halfway down. I texted him from the restroom and asked why he had disappeared. He answered that I had gone too far. I told him the room was only shocked because the resemblance had become obvious. He did not reply. At home, Theo fell asleep in his clothes. Warren changed him, tucked the rabbit beside his arm, and closed the bedroom door. Then he met me in the dining room. He did not shout. He did not ask why I had humiliated him. He placed both palms on the table and asked whether I had ever had a relationship with Callum. I said he was turning a birthday joke into an accusation because his pride had been hurt. Warren asked whether there was any chance Theo was not his biological son. I said no. The lie sat between his hands. He looked at me, then at the dark window behind me. After a long pause, he said okay. One word. That was all. I went upstairs, convinced I had won because Warren loved Theo too much to keep pulling at the question. His love had protected my secret for 5 years. I believed it would protect me again. The next morning, I told Callum that Warren had asked whether Theo was his. I laughed when I said it. Callum did not. He wanted to know what answer I had given. I said the only safe one. Then I told him to relax because Warren would never do anything that risked Theo's home. Callum said I spoke about Warren's love as if it were a lock I owned. That irritated me because it sounded like judgment from a man who had accepted every benefit of the secret. I reminded him that he had watched Theo grow and never asked for a test until the answer began flattering him. He ended the call. Over the next week, Warren behaved with such control that I mistook it for retreat. He moved into the guest room but continued making Theo's breakfast. He collected the birthday video from Daniel, saying he wanted all the files in one place. He asked Rebecca which guests had remained for the full toast. When she came to the house, they spoke on the porch while I edited photographs upstairs. I saw them through the studio window. Warren's hands lay flat on the porch rail while Rebecca talked. I told myself she was feeding his embarrassment because sisters preferred a wounded brother to a complicated one. The family tablet disappeared from the living room. When I asked about it, Warren said he had moved it to the locked desk drawer because it contained private material. I accused him of acting dramatic. He answered that privacy had mattered when I wanted to keep the messages from him. The sentence was too precise. I went back to my studio and changed my password. That night, I met Callum at the hotel bar. He arrived late and kept his coat on. For the first time since the affair resumed, he did not sit beside me. He asked what had happened 5 years earlier. I said he knew. He said he knew we had crossed a line. He did not know why I had chosen that month, or whether I had been trying to conceive with Warren at the same time. I could have lied again. Instead, I wanted him to understand the size of the compliment. I told him I had checked the dates. Warren was the best man I knew for raising a child, but I had feared our baby would inherit the parts of him that the world punished. Callum had the height and face I wanted my child to carry. Replacing Warren as a father had never been the plan. I had only wanted another genetic possibility. Callum stared at the small candle between us until wax ran onto the metal holder. He asked whether I had used him to get pregnant. I told him used was an ugly word for being chosen. He said I had allowed him to believe the affair was about desire. I answered that desire had been part of it. He asked how large a part. I counted the ice cubes in my glass before answering. 4. One had cracked down the center. I told him he should be proud that I had trusted his traits. Callum pushed his chair back. He said a child was not a portrait I could assemble from preferred features. Then he left enough cash under his glass to cover both drinks. I watched him cross the lobby and decided responsibility had frightened him. Warren asked for an official DNA test 2 days later. He handed me the information for an accredited family testing center. No accusations, no threat. He said Theo deserved adults who knew which facts were true, even if Theo never needed to hear how the question began. I asked whether he planned to stop being Theo's father if the result excluded him. Warren's palms settled on the desk between us. He said nothing could erase 5 years, but a lie could determine what happened next. I accused him of making love sound like a project review. I told him he had spent our marriage repairing objects because objects never demanded an honest feeling from him. He had made me beg for words and then acted surprised when attention from another man mattered. Warren did not deny it. He said he had hidden inside useful work. He said there were nights when I had asked for him and he had answered with a completed task. Then he asked whether that failure gave me the right to decide he was good enough to raise a child but not good enough to create one. I shut down the conversation. I said the test would answer the only question that mattered. Warren offered me one chance to tell him the full story before we went. He said he would keep the adult damage away from Theo if I stopped managing the facts. I refused. I told him he would feel ridiculous when the result confirmed what everyone at the party had seen. He slid the appointment card toward me and said he would handle the rest properly. The test was scheduled for Friday. Warren took Theo to the center without me because I had a school portrait session. The technician collected both samples under identification checks. Warren sent me the receipt and the date when the certified result would be ready. I forwarded the date to Callum. He did not respond for 9 hours. Mara never answered the message I sent asking whether she thought he was panicking. Her silence was small on the screen and enormous in my apartment. Callum finally said he would come to hear the result because he needed to know whether he had a responsibility. He made it clear that attending did not mean he had chosen me. I heard fear, not refusal. During the 12 days of waiting, I built a new future as carefully as I arranged a family session. Callum would need time. Warren would be hurt but reasonable. Theo would keep seeing the man who had raised him while learning that Callum had given him something Warren never could. I pictured explaining it when Theo was older. Warren had given him stability. Callum had given him the face that made people smile before he spoke. Each man had contributed what he did best. That was still how I counted it. Warren stopped asking questions. He took his coffee to the guest room. He removed his clothes from our closet in neat groups and left my side untouched. When Theo asked why Dad slept across the hall, Warren said grown-ups sometimes needed quiet to make good decisions. I called that another performance. Warren wanted to look calm because calm was the only advantage he had left. The night before the result, I found the green album on the dining table. It was open to our second garden photograph, the one taken beside the glass pavilion. Warren's nose was red from cold. My hair had blown across my mouth. We both looked happy because we had not checked the image before accepting it. Beside the album sat his childhood photograph. I looked at the pale hair, pressed lips, and uneven ears. Then I saw the left corner of his mouth lifting higher than the right. Theo did that when he tried not to laugh. For a few seconds, the room offered another answer. I closed the album. One expression did not outweigh 5 years of resemblance. Warren had placed the photograph there because he needed hope. Letting him keep hope for one more night felt kinder than challenging it. The next morning, I dressed for the testing center as if I were meeting a client. Cream blouse, dark trousers, hair pulled back. I wanted the room to see a composed mother, not a guilty wife. Callum met me in the parking lot. He stayed near his own car until I walked toward the entrance. His face looked tired, but even tired suited him. That small fact reassured me. Warren was already inside. He sat alone at a round table in a consultation room with frosted glass walls. The certified envelope lay in front of him. Beside it was a second, thinner folder. Both of his hands rested flat on the table. I took the chair across from him. Callum sat beside me, leaving more space between us than the chair required. The clinic coordinator confirmed our names and said the result could be released because Warren had completed the legal parent test with Theo and had authorized me to attend. Warren slid the envelope toward me. He asked me to read it. I smiled because I thought he wanted the humiliation completed by my own voice. Patience, as I understood it then, was what people used when they had no better move. With Callum watching, I opened the envelope. The first page listed identification numbers, collection dates, and laboratory language. I skipped to the bold line near the bottom. Probability of paternity, 99. 99%. Warren Mercer could not be excluded as Theo's biological father. I read the line again. My thumb dragged across the paper and left a damp mark near the result. Callum leaned closer. He asked whether I had opened the correct envelope. I checked the names. Warren. Theo. The collection date. All correct. I said Theo looked like Callum. Callum turned toward me and asked why I had claimed I knew. The room had no flattering angle. Frosted glass flattened the light. The table was too small for distance, and the paper in my hand would not become another picture because I stared at it longer. Warren's palms remained on the table. Now I understood the posture. He had not been holding himself up at the birthday party. He had been waiting for me to finish choosing my own words. He said that every time I had looked at our son and found something beautiful, I had convinced myself it could not have come from him. I put the result down, but my hand stayed over Theo's name. I tried to explain that I had been younger and afraid. Warren said I had been afraid our child would resemble the man I trusted to raise him. He reminded me of the childhood photograph, Rebecca's comment about Theo's mouth, and the smile I had dismissed. The clues had been in our home for 5 years. I had edited them out. Then Warren opened the thinner folder. He had Daniel's birthday video, the messages left on our family tablet, confirmation of the hotel meetings, and Daniel's account of what he heard below Theo's portrait. None of it proved paternity. It proved what I had done while letting paternity excuse it. I said the test meant Theo was his, as if that repaired the part that mattered to Warren. He answered that Theo had always been his. The test only proved how little I believed beauty could belong to either of them. Callum stood. I reached for his sleeve, but he moved his arm before I touched it. I told him the result did not erase what existed between us. He said I had not chosen him. I had chosen his height, his face, and whatever confidence I imagined could pass through blood. Then he placed his visitor badge on the table and walked out without looking through the glass again. The petition for dissolution had been filed that morning, and the temporary parenting schedule would arrive through council. I moved into the apartment above my studio, where Theo slept in a folding bed beside stacked backdrop cases on my parenting nights. Our shared savings went towards separate households, testing costs, and the ordinary bills Warren had once handled before I saw them. Mara stopped calling. Daniel removed me from the birthday group, and Rebecca spoke to me only about Theo's pickup times. Callum blocked my number and sent Warren one written apology that did not mention me. 3 families cancelled portrait sessions after the birthday video spread through our parent circle, and Warren withdrew permission for Theo's face to appear in my studio samples. A year later, I went to Warren's townhouse on a Sunday afternoon to collect Theo. Warren opened the door with one hand on Theo's backpack. They had been making pancakes. Flour marked the front of Warren's shirt, and a smaller white handprint sat on Theo's sleeve. Theo told me Dad had made the first pancake too large and had needed 2 spatulas to turn it. He tried not to laugh while he said it. The left corner of his mouth rose first. Warren's mouth did the same. Rebecca came from the dining room carrying the green album. Theo had asked to see pictures from before he was born. She said he looked more like his father every year. Once, I would have corrected her. I would have found Callum's eyes, my cheekbones, or some better sauce for every feature. That afternoon, I fastened Theo's coat and said nothing. The birthday photograph remained on my private drive. Sloane, Theo, and Callum under the glass pavilion. My hand on the wrong man's arm. Theo smiling at the person holding the camera. I had believed I could build the best family by choosing which man belonged in each part of it. Warren gave Theo every trait I valued after I had spent 5 years assigning those traits to someone else. Callum gave me nothing permanent. I supplied the lie that placed both men where I wanted them, then called the arrangement love because Warren kept it standing. The only real father in that picture was the man I had ordered to stand behind the camera.